Bees and bee products are so interesting because bees have been around since prehistoric times. Um, Bee products have a really incredible healing history and not just honey. So, honey has been used across cultures. They've actually found honey in Egyptian tombs that's nutritionally intact. So, honey is the only food on the planet that never expires, which is fascinating and a testament to its enzyme quality. It literally never goes bad. Like, it will outlive all of us.
Awesome. I'm live with Carly Stein Kremer, founder and CEO of Beekeepers Naturals. It's awesome to have you here today, Carly.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Yes, I've been wanting to do this for a bit. I've been a big fan of you and your products and bees in general, and your wealth of knowledge when it comes to all these bee focused products. And I'm excited to get into it. I thought we could start with maybe why bees are so essential or critical to our ecosystem and how they're connected to our food supply. And then we'll go from there.
Awesome. Yeah, I love starting here because it's literally the foundation for everything. So people don't really realize this, but bees pollinate one third of our food supply. So every third bite of food you take, th- to phrase it differently, comes from the bees. So, things like apples, blueberries, even clover that cattle graze on. Like all of our plants, flowers, tomatoes wouldn't exist without the bees. And then, I mentioned clover that cattle graze on. All of these different wildflowers are pollinated by bees. So without bees, things literally can't grow. And, our food supply would take a radical hit, and the entire ecosystem would be flipped on its head because all of these flowering plants cannot flower and grow and reproduce without the support of the bees. Bees are the world's most efficient pollinators. So, we literally need bees to live. Over 40% of wildflowers require bee pollination. And without them, we would have a complete food desert and we would see, habitat loss and devastation to a lot of different creatures. So, I think, when we talk about the plight of the bees and what's happening and how important they are, a lot of people are like, there's some little insect, whatever. Like, there's so many other bigger issues. And there are so many issues in the world today. It's challenging, but the bees are foundational to life itself. So it is really important and it affects everyone. Even if you don't care about fruits and vegetables and produce and other animals, if you only eat steak, well, then the bees still affect you. So, we really need to understand the importance here and support bees if we want to continue living as we do.
When people say like save the bees, and I think I've even seen that in some of your marketing, why is that? Like what's happening? What is the state of bees and what's happening and how do we as a culture and in agriculture reverse that?
So, bees have been in a state of decline for a number of years now. There's a number of different factors when it comes to bee decline. There's also a lot of controversy around it. As you can imagine, pesticide companies don't love when the finger gets pointed their way. But to list some of the factors, so in my opinion, one of the most important variables in bee decline is about pesticide use. This to me is one of the most important factors, and this is really what my company fights so hard to change. And at Beekeepers Naturals, we have a sustainable supply chain, so we're doing regenerative, pesticide-free beekeeping all over the world. So we're literally setting up safe habitats for the bees where they aren't exposed to pesticides. And in doing that, we've seen population growth year over year. We've seen our bees, really just thriving. So pesticides are a really big factor, and pesticides have evolved. So in 2006, when DDT was taken out of the game, I'm sure people remember seeing horrific pictures of birds and different creatures that were dying in response to DDT. So that was taken out, and
Sorry, what is DDT?
it's just a type of pesticide that was used quite a few years ago, and it was devastating different creatures, and so it was banned. And a new pesticide came into play, something called neonicotinoids. Today, neonicotinoids is very commonly used across the U.S. Um, and it's really harmful for the bees. So it actually affects their spatial reasoning. In different parts of the world, they've banned neonicotinoids. glyphosate is, an ingredient that, or a chemical that contains neonicotinoids. So in different parts of the world, there's a ban on these chemicals, but in the US, it's still used. So in parts of Europe, it's banned. In Canada, in Ontario, where I'm from, they've instituted a partial ban. So in other parts of the world, people are recognizing that this pesticide, it's hurting the bees. And if it's hurting the bees, we really don't know what it does to us in the long term. We know that it's a water soluble substance. So it's getting into our water supply, it's degrading our soil. It literally grows through the vascular system of the plant. So in many cases, seeds will be dipped in this substance and it will like grow through the plant. It can also be sprayed on top. So it's used in different ways, but we know that it's incredibly harmful to bees. And we do not know the long-term effect it has on humans, on other creatures, on different aspects of our environment. So to me, this is a really critical issue. And when we talk about saving the bees, one of the big ways that we're doing it at Beekeepers Naturals is through pesticide-free beekeeping. So we're creating this sustainable supply chain. We're working in geographies where these pesticides are banned. We're working in remote geographies where we can actually control for a 5 mile radius on all ends of a pesticide-free zone, because that's the maximum distance the bees will fly. And we're creating safe spaces for bees and watching how that affects their population in a really positive way. There are other factors that come into play when you're talking about the bee decline, climate change. I mean, it's really disruptive for bees. And in cold parts of the world, the bees will hibernate. And when it all of a sudden gets really hot and they come out for their cleansing flight, and then all of a sudden it snaps back to cold the next day, they can all die. So, that's a really disruptive situation. Urbanization, the loss of habitat, bees, flowers, and trees and plants, it's their food. So the loss of these things really affects them. And, there's a lot of other different ideas that have been put forward, but to me, those are some of the big ones. I think, you know, pesticides in our agricultural system are really problematic. I think um, monocropping changes the environment for bees, because you basically have one type of crop and it will bloom. And then after the bloom period, it's a food desert. And so, of course, monocropping makes sense economically for people who are specializing in one crop type or another. But what I like to advocate for is margin planting. So if you are monocropping, make sure that you're doing like 30% margin planting in the perimeter, so you've got food diversity for the bees and for other creatures. So there's practices you can implement. And then I think a big thing to do as a consumer is, to the extent you can, and I know it's tricky and it's not always available and it's more expensive, but supporting regenerative farming, organic, biodynamic, people who are trying to move away from pesticides. I think to the extent we can support that industry, that does make a difference. And then in your own space, plant flowers. Even when I lived in New York, on my windowsill and fire escape, I was planting organic flowers because that's food for the bees. And again, they're losing their food, they're losing clean food. So that's really important. And what I hope for is more companies making the choices that Beekeepers does when it comes to working with bees. So our whole supply chain, the way it's set up, basically as my company grows and scales, we expand our supply chain, and as we're expanding our supply chain, we're expanding clean space for the bees to thrive. So that's been a beautiful evolution for me, is being able to grow this company and of course have the mission of affecting people's health and giving people tools and really reinventing the medicine cabinet, but sort of behind the scenes on the supply chain side, being able to do something that truly impacts the environment. So that's a little bit about the bees.
Yeah. Yeah, so you have the pesticide use that is impacting the food supply for the bees, but then on the flip side of that, there's companies like Beekeepers Naturals, and then consumer demand that is asking not just for better bee products, but asking for other types of organic and regenerative food that is then creating a better environment for bees to thrive.
Yeah, and just awareness, like you look at, parts of Europe where they've banned these substances. There's been a lot of government lobbying and just people educating themselves on what's being sprayed all over their environment and planted in their food, and again degrading their soil, getting into their water supply. So I think to the extent you can take it upon yourself to learn. And, I certainly have written a lot of letters to local government officials. And, I've spoken at different summits and been on panels with people who are, senior at these pesticide companies. And so just trying to advocate for awareness and um, really challenge the use of pesticides. So I think on an individual level, to the extent that people can learn about that and get involved in that cause, it really does make a difference.
So as you're learning about this stuff and as the company is growing and you're expanding your product line, how do you look for these suppliers? Are you like Googling it? Are you asking for connections from one supplier to the next? Are you traveling to these places to actually bid?
I travel a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, so at this point, we have a really great network, and it's really built on itself. We started because the
How many
beekeepers that we work
places do
with,
you get
oh my
products from?
gosh. Well, we have we're doing a lot of work in South America. We do tons of work in Europe. We do a lot of work in Canada. Those are kind of the big three, and we're working in different places within those regions. When I started beekeeping and I was practicing regenerative beekeeping myself, and I just met other people in the beekeeping community. And our first big apiary that we set up was in Kingston, Ontario. And
So do you own bee farms as well?
we don't own it. We partner with beekeepers. We don't own the land. We partner with different beekeepers to set up sustainable apiaries, and then we have like pretty amazing arrangement with them where we become their sole client and we support them in expanding. And we're a very good client because we're growing, and as they grow, they are able to purchase more land. And we've seen this happen in practice now with several different apiaries that we work with. They've been able to really expand their footprint, and now they have a very, very large space where they're practicing regenerative farming and working with the bees in a really clean, beautiful way. But how it started was kind of word of mouth. I was doing it myself. I met some other beekeepers, and then there was demand, and they had a friend over here. And then, um,
Okay,
we
so
got
you were
to,
sorry,
we,
I need to double click there. So you were doing it, you maybe even to go a little bit backwards, you mentioned Europe. I remember you mentioning at one point to me that you were having chronic tonsillitis and you went to Florence and that's where you discovered propolis or these bee products. So you come back, maybe double click there and you come back and you just start doing this on your own.
yeah, so a few things happened. So I was struggling with chronic tonsillitis. I'm allergic to antibiotics, which, if you have tonsillitis or strep throat or any of these things, most people just knock it out with antibiotics. But for me, that's not an option. So I would be sick for like 3 weeks at a time, and it was really painful, and I couldn't swallow, and I had a hard time breathing, and all of these things. So for me, it really affected my life quality. And when I was doing a semester abroad in college, I got really, really sick. I went to see this pharmacist in Florence, and she told me about propolis. And like many of us, I didn't know that the bees did anything beyond honey. I knew about honey, but I didn't know about propolis and royal jelly and pollen and these more medicinal grade compounds that come from the beehive. And so she introduced me to propolis. I started using it. In 5 days, I made a full recovery, which had never happened to me before. I had never taken something and just actually gotten better in 5 days. And, I'd had the experience of having adverse reactions to things and, just always kind of a challenging situation. And so that was my first introduction to propolis. And from there, I just went down the research rabbit hole and I found study after study on propolis and things like how propolis works as an immunomodulatory agent, looking at how propolis affects post-oxidative stress, looking at how it modifies the histamine response, like so many amazing things. And I was like, whoa, why are we not using propolis more? This is crazy. And I continued my time in Europe. I was using propolis every day. I didn't get sick again, which was also new for me. I was there for 7 months, and that was like the longest I'd ever gone in my life without getting sick. And the only new variable was the propolis. I was also using, I started to learn more about like royal jelly and pollen. So I was incorporating these other things. And I never thought I would start a company or become a beekeeper. I thought I was going to become a cancer researcher and like that was what I was going to do with my life. And when I went home to Canada to finish up college, I got really sick and I couldn't find propolis anywhere. And I finally found organic propolis at a farmer's market. And I was very excited. And it was like $40 for a little thing, which in my opinion is very expensive, it's tiny. Um, and I used it and I had a really severe allergic reaction. And at the time, I was a TA for my chemistry class. So I ran a toxicity panel on the product I purchased. And I realized that there were trace amounts of pesticides. And for a lot of people, trace amount, you get exposed to pesticides all the time. It doesn't really affect them. But for me being autoimmune and having a really sensitive system, it did really affect me. I broke out in hives head to toe. Like it was a whole thing. And so that sent me down a different rabbit hole of understanding why could I take this product in Europe and have a great response? And then in North America, I'm having this awful reaction. And so then I started learning about the different use of pesticides and the different, the different regulatory environment. And I was like, okay, if you want something done right, you have to do it yourself. I'm just going to start beekeeping and I'm going to do it in a really remote area and I'm gonna run quality control on my own products because clearly this is what works for me. I keep getting sick when I'm not taking propolis and I feel amazing when I have it. And I can't find it in the quality that I need. So I'm just gonna get it for myself. So I started beekeeping and it was really like something I did out of necessity. And then I became obsessed. I mean,
Like on the weekends, would you drive outside of Toronto?
yeah, we can. I mean, I was in college, so I was in British Columbia at the
Okay.
time. And so I was in college, so I didn't have like not every day was like a full day of classes. So I would, I found this incredible mentor. He basically had an apiary that was like somewhat remote, and so there wasn't pesticide exposure. We weren't close to like crazy agricultural growth areas. And I learned about how the bees, the max foraging distance, the max distance they'll fly for food is 5 miles. So really what you need is a 5 mile radius on all ends of clean ground because this is why like organic honey is kind of BS because just because the hive is sitting on certified organic land, if the neighbors are doing something dirty, you can't put a leash on the bees. It's not, you can't fence them in like cattle or they're not going to stay put like blueberries. They're going to fly. So if they fly next door and pollinate the plants over there, they'll bring those pesticides back to the hive. So organic becomes really murky when it comes to bee products. It's actually really not a good barometer for cleanliness. So I was like, okay,
What is a good barometer for cleanliness?
pesticide free. Pesticide free when you come to bee products, yeah, which is rare, which is really rare. We're seeing it more. Beekeepers kind of pioneered that, so I'm very proud of that. But we're definitely seeing more of that, which is really cool. But at that time, the standard was organic, and it was just kind of like what we had. And for other things, that works, but for bees specifically, because they move, it doesn't work that well. So I learned about the max foraging distance, and I was like, okay, this is the max plot of land I need and I need to make sure that there's no pesticides, there's no dirty stuff happening for this distance. And I did that. And then I was testing the product before I was putting it in my body, given my reaction. And I did a lot. It was like just a lot of testing and experimenting. And I realized that that really worked. And it was a really amazing time because I really was not thinking about starting a company. It was just like pure pursuit of passion. Um, and like pure learning. And so
How old are you at the time?
I was 21. My friends thought
Wow.
it was insane because like that's like a pretty weird activity for a college kid.
And you were literally just geeking out on it because you were so interested in it and it had a direct impact on your own health and well-being.
It made such a radical difference to my health. And I stopped getting tonsillitis, but also just how I felt. And, you know, like so many different things changed when I started incorporating propolis into my routine. And more has changed since I started using royal jelly and pollen and really high quality honey too. So I was just fascinated and I wanted to feel like that all the time. So I didn't have another choice really.
And why, as you were learning about maybe like the history of honey and the history of bees, why is it that you're feeling these things? I know now we validated a lot of it with scientific research, but and some people might not even be familiar outside of honey that bees make these other products, maybe besides pollen. but can you walk us through some of these different products that come from bees and the history?
Totally. So I'll start with just really quick history and then I'll kind of walk you through all the products because I think you're totally right. And myself included, I did not know that the bees did anything beyond honey, and propolis is so different than honey, and royal jelly is totally different. And they have different health applications and can be used in very different ways. So I will walk us through all of that. But bees and bee products are so interesting because bees have been around since prehistoric times. Um, Bee products have a really incredible healing history, and not just honey. So honey has been used across cultures. They've actually found honey in Egyptian tombs that's nutritionally intact. So honey is the only food on the planet that never expires, which is fascinating and a testament to its enzyme quality. It literally never goes bad. Like, it will outlive all of us. Sometimes people come to me and they're like, my honey kind of solidified. And I'm like, yeah, it crystallizes. Like, that's normal, but you can still eat it. It's totally fine. So honey has been used across cultures. Propolis as well. The first recorded human use of propolis dates back to 300 BC. It was a part of, like, for many different cultures, the medical systems. The Assyrians would drink propolis, and they saw it as something that reduced inflammation and fever. And you
And
know,
what is it?
what is
What is
propolis?
propolis?
So
Yeah.
honey, so let me start with honey because it will make a little, I think it'll be easier for people. So honey you can think of as the food of the bees. It's their carbs. And honey comes from flowers. The bees will collect floral nectar, they bring it back to the hive, it ferments, they have honey. It's delicious for humans. It has immune supporting properties. It's really high in antioxidants. It's one of the healthiest sweeteners with a lower glycemic index than sugar. Topically, it has amazing skin effects. It's a humectant, so it helps to strengthen the moisture barrier, um, all that good stuff. So honey, it's the bee's carbs. It's delicious. It also helps with relaxation. I take a teaspoon of honey before bed because it helps, especially for women who get depleted in their glycogen stores. It really helps you to sleep through the night. So a lot of applications for honey, and comes from flowers. Propolis you can think of as the immune system or the medicine of the hive. While honey comes from flowers, propolis comes from plant and tree resin. So, if like you cut a tree, sap will trickle out. That's the immunoproperties of the plant. So, propolis, the base ingredient of propolis, is literally the immunoproperties of plants. The bees will collect the plant and tree resins, mix it with their enzymes, and that's how they make this sticky amber colored substance called propolis. And then what they do with it is they use it to line the hive and keep it germ free. So without propolis, the hive would not survive. It is 110% of their defense against germs, pathogens, everything. So it's a really protective substance for the bees, also for humans. Really interesting, before the advent of antibiotics, propolis was really commonly used. In the 17th century, it was listed in the London Pharmacopoeia as an official drug. During the Boer War, people were dressing wounds with propolis and honey because of the antibacterial effects. So we have this really rich healing history with propolis, but especially in North America, it's just not as well known. Honeybees also aren't native to North America. So there's a few reasons why we're kind of catching up when it comes to propolis. In other cultures, people know propolis. In many cultures today, propolis is a part of the medical system. It's used, in the burn ward in Poland, they'll use propolis because of its effects on inflammation, because it's antibacterial, antifungal, antiviral. Propolis as a substance, it's really amazing. It's got over 300 beneficial compounds. It's a really unique substance. It's full of flavonoids and polyphenols, caffeic acid, all kinds of stuff that really helps to, put simply, strengthen your system. So for me, I used propolis to regulate and stabilize my immune system. I was constantly getting sick with the same thing. Um, I am immunocompromised, so a lot of the traditional immune products, sort of in the Western medical system, weren't accessible to me and made me sicker. And propolis really worked with my body, and now it's something I take every day. I do 4 sprays of propolis every single day, like literally since I was 21 and found propolis. I don't think I've missed a day of taking propolis. So it's radically changed my life.
Was the flagship product the propolis spray that y'all created?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, I started with
And
a
I
tincture and then
actually
I
took
put
some
it in the
today.
spray. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Amazing, amazing. So yeah, so
It
propolis is
almost
like
it almost
the
tastes
bodyguard.
too it tastes so good. I'm like, is this too good to be true?
I
It
know, it
tastes like
tastes really good,
candy.
but there's no sugar in propolis. That's the cool thing. It's like, we have a lot of customers who are on a ketogenic diet. And so, they can't have certain products of ours. Like they can't have our super food honey. But they love propolis. They love our brain fuel shots. Yeah, propolis is, there's no sugar.
And how do you is it like how do you retrieve it? Is it more is less propolis made in a hive than honey? Or is honey more abundant?
Not necessarily. It's different with different bees, different geographies. It's totally different, but we have a specific method at Beekeepers that we use that I learned when I started beekeeping as in my 20s and that we've sort of brought throughout the company. And with a lot of the beekeepers we work with today, like a lot of the beekeepers we work with, when I first met them, they were harvesting honey and they were like throwing out propolis. There was no market for it. They didn't know how to work with it. They didn't understand it. And so for in the early days, I literally went into apiaries and I was like, this is how we harvest propolis and taught people about it. And it's been really, really cool. And also to see, we see the difference on the consumer side, but to see the difference on the supply side. Like now I meet beekeepers all the time and they're like, oh, I want to work with you. I just got this certification for my land. I'm in a pesticide free zone. And like, they know about it now, which is really cool. But so traditionally how propolis is harvested, it's scraped off the sides of the hive wall, which isn't necessarily bad. It doesn't necessarily hurt bees, but for me, when I'm beekeeping, I'm trying to do things with like as much love and care as possible. And I'm really trying to be minimally invasive. So to me, going in, scraping and pulling the frames out, like that's a little annoying for the bees. So I don't want to do that. So what we do, and this is something I learned in my 20s when I started beekeeping, is we take a mesh sheet, we put it in. When the bees see holes, they'll fill it with propolis because they see a hole and they're like, uh-oh, germs can get in. We have to protect ourselves. We have to protect the family. Fill it up with propolis. So they fill it up with propolis. We take out the mesh, pop out the propolis, and it's like in, out, boom. And the bees produce a lot of propolis, and especially healthy, happy bees with, our bees are really happy because there's an abundance of food and there's biodiversity and there's not the pesticides and all the stuff that we're trying to protect them from. We've done a really great job, and our beekeeping partners have done excellent jobs at creating a beautiful environment for the bees. So um, that's something that's really awesome to see. And one other thing about bees that's kind of interesting is they'll use propolis to line the inside of the cell wall for newborns. So they're literally using propolis to create a sterile environment for newborns. So it's just a powerful protective substance for bees and humans.
And then as when you have the spray, and then I know you recently create a liposomal propolis vitamin C. Like how have you decided to go from the propolis to the products that you've offered with propolis? Like do you also do supplements or pills that you could take? Like what is the form factor that you've
Yeah,
decided on?
we have a ton of different form factors. So our propolis spray, which is really what I launched the company with, and we've expanded over the years. And how we've expanded, it's so the whole sort of um, our whole mission with Beekeepers Naturals is disrupting the medicine cabinet. Because for me, modern medicine didn't work for me. My idea when I started this company was there are a lot of people out there like me who are immunocompromised and conventional medicine just isn't accessible. And then there's a lot of people who, even if they're not immunocompromised, conventional medicine isn't super in line with their values. They don't want to use steroids or things with sugars or artificial sweeteners, or they don't want something that's going to kind of be a band-aid. They want to address the whole system. And so I felt like I saw this better for you movement permeate every sector. We saw food change, beverage change, clean beauty, and my healthiest friends were still taking like NyQuil to fall asleep and stuff like that. And so I was like, that's where we really need something different. And I think there's so many amazing things within wellness. And there's also a lot of marketing and a lot of confusion. And I know for me as a consumer, before I started this company, I was really frustrated with the whole sort of like wellness product world because I would buy things that were expensive and well branded and made these claims and just didn't deliver on results. And so for me, I really wanted something that sort of sat at the intersection of science and wellness. And that's what Beekeepers is, where we're using all natural ingredients, but we're applying the scientific rigor, um, like really the scientific rigor and method that you would see in the pharmaceutical world. We're practicing third-party testing. We're formulating all of our products based on third-party published science. We're working with physicians. We have at this point a pretty large chem team who, yeah, so we're really focused on, we don't want to just like put out a good for you product. We want to solve a problem and we want to give people the tools to feel the way they deserve to, which is amazing all the time. So how I've kind of expanded the product line, a lot of it's been based on third party published science. A great example of that are cough syrup and immune syrup. There was a study that came out a few years ago looking at cough syrup for kids. It was looking at cough syrup and it was looking at upper pediatric respiratory infections. And it was specifically comparing dextromethorphan, which is an active ingredient in a lot of the cough syrups that we buy over the counter, comparing it to buckwheat honey, which is a specific honey varietal. And again, like a study done looking at upper pediatric respiratory infections, looking at kids. Kids were part of this. It was a really well done study. And what it found was buckwheat honey was just as effective as dextromethorphan. And when I read that, I was like, okay, why would you give a kid dextro then? Why would you give an adult dextro? Like that's a broken system. If there's a cleaner alternative that doesn't have the side effects, that has other positive effects, that works point blank just as well, why wouldn't you choose that option? And so that was the idea behind our cough syrup. And our cough syrup, it's got a buckwheat honey base. Of course, we have my favorite immune support in there. We've got propolis, we've got olive leaf extract, we've got chaga. Um, we've just created a great formula, and we're working with all natural ingredients, but we're working with science-backed ingredients. And I think that's like a very, very key difference.
Yeah. Yeah. I've been thinking about that a lot. I was hanging out somewhere and at the bottom of an apartment and I saw a package coming in from Soylent and it said science based. And usually I see science backed. And I know it's such a small like difference, but it just got me really thinking about how products are sold with this science backed or science based, sticker or validation on them, and then how consumers interpret them. It sort of seems like
It
the wild wild
is.
west out there, where there's not necessarily a lot of uh, oversight over what is actually branded or marketed as science based.
It is. It totally is. And that was something for me because I was always sick and because I'm so sensitive that I really struggled with. And that's what Beekeepers is trying to do. We're trying to be that company that's like, hey, we're safe. And it's built for people like me. And to your point, it's totally the Wild West. In the US, so there's the FDA, and then there's no regulatory body for natural. And then even within the FDA, to go through an FDA trial, it's millions of dollars and many years, and young companies that want to innovate and do it differently. It's really hard to do that. It's the same with like getting an organic certification. It's really prohibitive for a lot of young small scale farmers. So and I meet people all the time who are doing complete organic practices on the farming side, but can't get the certification because you need to be doing organic farming for 3 years, but selling your products at unorganic prices, but doing the organic farm. So it's kind of a backward system. So, anyways, not to go on a tangent here, on the supplement side, there's FDA and then there's it's the Wild West. There's really not a regulatory body when it comes to wellness products, which I think is a problem. In other parts of the world, Canada being one of them where I'm from, there is a regulatory body. There's in Canada, Health Canada provides something called an NPN. It's a natural product number. And in order to get an NPN, you have to legally validate all the health claims. So we have NPNs on all of our products. And it's interesting because sometimes I'll meet we work with a lot of doctors now. We work with full scripts and we're seeing physicians prescribing our products, which is super cool. But we're at all the medical conferences now, and we have, of course, our medical advisory board, but I'll talk to doctors all the time and they'll be like, yeah, I'm always looking for products with NPNs because that way, at least there's like some regulation. And so we've gone through the NPN certification with everything. And we did that, one, because I'm Canadian and we want to sell our products in Canada, but two, because for me as a consumer, that's something that I always looked for. And as a consumer to this day, you know, I don't use very much outside of my own line, full transparency, but occasionally I'll use,
What do you take outside of your own line?
well, right now I'm planning to be pregnant at some point in the future. So I'm taking like prenatals, like, stuff like that. And I'm looking for companies that have NPN certification, or I'm looking for, sometimes European companies, like not there, there's incredible, I live in the US and there's incredible innovation here, but in terms of regulating this stuff for someone like me, I have to be really careful. And to your point, like it's not it's like a little bit of a broken system. And it was interesting because before I started this company, I worked in finance and I was a trader. And one of the things that I did was I traded a lot of biotech names. And so I was always reading about companies that had like a patent pending drug. And I would have to do a lot of research. And that's kind of where I honed a lot of my research skills as well. But I'd have to do a lot of research on, is this drug going to get approved or not? And I would read through like every side effect, every study, everything that went wrong. And sometimes I would be like, this isn't going to get approved. We're going to short this one. And then it got approved. And like, it's crazy what goes through. And um, yeah, I think that it needs to be disrupted on a lot of different levels.
Yeah, it's amazing what y'all have built so far, and I'm excited for what the future holds. It's cool to see things like ashwagandha, rhodiola, some of the functional mushrooms, and then even like fish oils actually being prescribed in the medical system for things like heart disease and yeah, for mental health. So I wonder when it'll be cool to see that more and more with these bee products as well. Um, the we hit honey, we hit propolis. I've heard a lot about royal jelly and pollen, and now this makes me want to try your superfood honey, which I think you've said you put it all in one.
I'm obsessed with the superfood honey. I'll send you guys some because you should try it. It's so good. But before I go there, just a few more things about propolis because clearly I'm obsessed with propolis. I love all the bee products, but like, I mean, propolis changed my life in every way possible. So propolis, antifungal, antiviral, antibacterial, amazing for inflammation, amazing for modulating the histamine response. So a lot of people use propolis for allergies. We actually came out with a nasal spray that is propolis based. And so that's a really great way for supporting your nasal microbiome, for reducing your, all of those kind of stuffy responses, that sort of thing. So that's a really great product. We also have these sinus support capsules. So for me, normally this time of year, like itchy eyes, stuffy nose, all the stuff, our sinus support capsules are awesome. There's propolis in there, there's bromelain, quercetin, nettle. It's a really high impact formula with, of course, really clean ingredients. Also, I've just been reading so much about quercetin and inflammation, so other cool ingredients in there too.
Where, like you mentioned, like it sounds like you spent a lot of time reading research reviews, third party reviews, or research. Do you still do that now?
I probably spend 3 hours a day yeah, at least 3 hours a day. And I have a full team now. But I still do it just to like the way like some people read the news in the morning. I'm on PubMed, or I subscribe to a bunch of different medical journals, so I'm constantly looking at it. But I also have an amazing team. I have, um, my lead chemist is constantly sending me new stuff. We have this really great doctor on our team who's been with me from the early days. He actually left the company, went to med school, and then came back and works on our product dev team. But yeah, I have now like a really amazing group of individuals who are constantly doing research to find like the next amazing application. And I mean, if for anyone who's curious, just go onto PubMed and type in propolis and like you'll see like there's a lot of cool stuff happening, and there's a lot of studies right now. They're looking at topical applications for propolis for things like eczema and psoriasis, things like sunburn, serious burns, propolis and gut health. We just started our first clinical trial looking at propolis and how it affects the gut. Because
Like you actually funded it or doing it first party?
yeah, yeah, which is really, really cool. It's our first time being able to do that. So yeah, so we just kicked that off, and we know that propolis, it strengthens the tinctures in the digestive lining. So basically it helps to prevent and treat leaky gut. And so many people deal with leaky gut. Propolis also contains a compound in it called pinosembrin, which acts as a fungicide, so really powerful for candida. And then propolis itself is a prebiotic. So propolis has a ton of gut health applications, which are really cool. And there's a lot of studies right now happening in the medical community around propolis, which is very, very cool. And so it's interesting because I feel like, 5 years ago when I spoke about propolis, it was like this fringe hippy dippy thing. And now it's like kind of on the cutting edge of health.
I feel like a lot of health is that's happening is a lot of the a lot of the fringe or outside, like psychedelics, for example, is another one that is now has so much research and promise behind it. What's the most I love supplementation in general, and I'm curious for propolis. What is the most effective way to take it? Is it a tincture?
No, so our spray, I mean, we're testing for bioavailability. Like we run every test possible. I'm a great guinea pig when it comes to products because I'm so sensitive and react to so much. So that forced us from day one of this company. I was like, I'm not going to make products that I can't take every day. So we do a ton of testing. So we're using really high quality propolis. So our spray is super effective. We just launched the liposomal propolis. So that's a propolis plus vitamin C for people who don't know liposomal, it's basically like a new delivery mechanism. It mimics the cell membrane. So it's a way to absorb more nutrients. And for us, we've got 1,000 milligrams of vitamin C and 100 milligrams of propolis. And the upper limit of absorption for vitamin C in like a capsule, I think is like 300 to 500 milligrams. I might be like a little bit off there, but it's in that ballpark. So people are taking these capsules of vitamin C and their body's only absorbing so much, and they're kind of buying this fancy supplement only to have expensive pee. They're peeing it out. So liposomal is a delivery mechanism where your body can actually pull out all the nutrients. So that's like a really amazing high impact. Like if I feel like I'm like just run down after expo or like I'm traveling or anything like that, I'm taking our spray with me, of course, but I'm also going to use one of our liposomal propolis, our complete gut health. We have a really incredible product. This product has very, very much changed my life. I'll text.
It's a probiotic.
Yeah, pre, pro, and postbiotic. So it's complete gut health. So we've got propolis in there as a prebiotic. We're the first propolis-based gut health formula. We've got a spore-based probiotic. So spore-based has the highest survivability. A lot of the probiotics you buy, they die in the bottle. Like if you think about it, a probiotic that's in the fridge, well, if it's in the fridge, like how does that survive the digestive journey? There's a lot of heat and acid. Um, yeah, so a lot of the probiotics, they don't necessarily, at least in full potency, make their way through your system. So spore-based has the best survivability. So we're using a really high quality spore-based probiotic. And then we're using a postbiotic in there, a compound called tributyrate, which promotes short chain fatty acids. It's actually absorbed by the colon. So it helps with like bloating, digestion, all the stuff. And it's interesting because I feel like we learned about probiotics and then people started learning about prebiotics, and you really need postbiotics too, and that's kind of new. And so for us, we were developing this gut health product for like 2 years. We worked with several gastroenterologists. We like ran betas in these different clinics, and we were seeing these people with all kinds of colon and digestive issues, with colon scans coming back looking totally different after like 2-3 weeks on our product. And so that's a really, really cool one that we launched and that we're going to be rolling out with Target. I'm really excited about that. But yeah, it's a really great product. And then I got so caught up in propolis that I didn't answer your other question about royal jelly and pollen. So just to get back to that for a sec, so honey is the carbs of the hive. Propolis is the immune system of the hive, and it's the properties of trees and plants and tree resins mixed with the enzymes from the bees. So it's a really protective, nourishing substance known for immune support, but with a lot of different applications. And then royal jelly, you can think of as like the brain food of the hive. So royal jelly It's kind of similar to like breast milk or colostrum. The first 3 days of when a baby bee is born, for the first 3 days, they'll be given royal jelly. Then after like 3 to 5 days, they'll switch off onto a normal diet of honey and pollen. And only the bee who's to become the queen bee will continue on her exclusive royal jelly diet. And it's really interesting because if you look at queen bee versus regular bee, the queen bee on a biological level is totally different. The queen bee will, live 3 to 5 years versus a regular bee during foraging season. They'll live 6 to 8 weeks. The queen bee will lay like 1,500 babies a day, whereas regular female bees, they don't have reproductive organs. So royal jelly in the hive does a lot of cool stuff. And then for humans, people have been using it in different cultures in like traditional Chinese medicine. It's really well known for supporting fertility, hormones, that sort of thing. There was just a study that came out that's really cool that um, royal jelly, like orally taken royal jelly, completely reduced menopause symptoms. So really, really cool. But a lot of science is focused on how royal jelly affects the brain. So royal jelly is a very powerful nootropic. It's one of the only naturally occurring sources of acetylcholine, which is the neurotransmitter responsible for brain-body connection. And then it also contains these two fatty acids that are only naturally occurring in royal jelly. One's called AMPN1 oxide, and the other's called 10-HDA, and they basically promote brain-derived nootropic factor or act as catalysts for neurogenesis. So royal jelly, to put simply, it's amazing for focus, memory, concentration. Really great for overall
And
mental health.
you have that product,
We
right?
have our
Is it mixed with ginkgo? Is it
yeah,
mixed with ginkgo
yep, ginkgo,
biloba?
and we also put Bacopa monnieri in there. So it's royal jelly, and then ginkgo biloba, which is an extract from a tree, really popular in traditional Chinese medicine, known for promoting circulation in the brain, adaptogenic, so helps to modulate the stress response and protect the body. And then we've also got Bacopa monnieri, which is very popular in Ayurvedic medicine. It's an extract from a leaf. It's it's known for promoting memory, also an adaptogen, so helps to modulate the stress response. And so it's just those three herbs in a shot. You throw it back, and you're like, for me, it's like limitless. I'm like in the zone. So I have one of those every afternoon. I take it like 5 days a week. Um, and then
Will it
our
keep you up at night
yeah,
if you have
don't
that
take it too
over?
late. There's no caffeine or anything in
Yeah.
it, but royal jelly is really energizing, and so you don't want to take like I don't take it after 5 p.m. ever. Like I usually, unless I'm like, sometimes I have to like have the late nights, but unless I'm doing that, I try to not take it after 5 p.m. I mean, I usually take it like in the afternoon. I have like seriously cut back on caffeine because it was just I'm an anxious person, if you can't tell. So our brain shots have really helped me. And then our superfood honey, that also has royal jelly in there. So it's kind of like a hive all in one. So we're using our signature pesticide free raw honey. And then we've got 745 milligrams of royal jelly. This is per teaspoon. So per teaspoon, you're getting 745 milligrams of royal jelly, 532 milligrams of bee pollen, and 43 milligrams of propolis. So that's like a nice way to just get like all the things from the hive in a really delicious way. And I put that in like my smoothies, my tea, everything.
Is that the one? Does royal jelly like make your tongue feel weird?
If you're allergic to it, it can, but not typically. Some for people who have mild allergies, pollen can make their tongue feel weird. But only if they have like mild allergies. So pollen's really interesting. People say to use like honey and pollen for allergies. I don't believe in that. Like what that the whole idea there is that you're microdosing with the allergen, which for some people can be really effective. But for some people, microdosing with the allergen is a lot. So I actually tell people for allergies, you want to go with propolis because propolis has an amazing effect when it comes to inflammation, but then also it reduces the histamine response. But some people have incredible results with pollen, and for other people, it's too strong. But the reason I love bee pollen, it's nature's multivitamin. So in bee pollen, you've got broad spectrum vitamins and minerals. There's actually more protein per weight than any animal source, which is really cool. And this is per weight, and pollen is like tiny sprinkles, so keep that in mind. But it's a really complete food. It's got branched chain amino acids. So a lot of people use pollen like kind of as their like especially people leading an active lifestyle as their multivitamin. They'll use it before they go to the gym. There's been studies looking at pollen and how it affects endurance. So there was a study looking at endurance athletes in Eastern Europe, and pollen really affected their ability to train. And so pollen's like a really cool energizing food for bees. Pollen is their protein source. So they're literally going flower to flower, collecting the pollen. They mix it with their enzymes, bring it back to the hive. And then, yeah, for me, like, you don't need much because it's so potent. And I'm not, right now, I'm taking prenatals because I need the folate. I also don't methylate. So it's a whole other thing. But when I'm not in that space, I'm only using, and I'm still using bee pollen, but I'm only using bee pollen as my multivitamin. It's super bioavailable, high in live enzymes. Ours is totally raw, and all you need is like a little sprinkle, and you're getting a big dose of nutrients.
So you don't take the multivitamin, but or right now you are, but usually you just take pollen?
Right now I am, but I don't normally. And like all of like my husband and I, like we do like pollen shots before we go to the gym. Like I'll just like I love the taste of it. And it's so funny because when I started beekeeping, I hated the taste of pollen. I thought it's like very earthy, like it's got like a wheatgrassy vibe. And I used to
Yeah,
think it
it's
was,
strong.
yeah, it's strong.
I
And
think I have an allergy because I get a little bit of a sensitivity when I take it.
so if it makes your tongue feel weird, you do have an allergy. So you don't want to use too much of it. So even like the superfood honey that's got a good dose of pollen for you, if you want to do that one, like tiniest little bit, but generally speaking, knowing you have any kind of pollen allergy, like you're great with our brain shots, you're great with our gut health, our nasal spray, our propolis spray, our liposomal. The pollen you just want to be using in small doses.
How much have you learned about the actual uh, like how the bees function? Like the fact that there's the queen bee. How's the queen bee chosen?
It's random. She's just so
Do you know anything about that?
so a lot. I'm always learning about how bees function because it's really cool for me. One, I geek out on this stuff, but two, I'm working with beekeepers from all different cultures. Like one of my mentors was a third generation beekeeper from Romania. So, very different way of working with bee products. And bee products are more common in the medical system. And, I'm working with people from all over the world who have different histories with bee products. So I'm literally learning all the time. And I always feel like I don't know anything, even after many, many years doing this, which is an amazing feeling. Um, so to answer your question about what did you ask me? You asked me how
How's the queen bee chosen?
the queen bee is chosen. Yes. Okay, so it's kind of random. So first of all, if the hive has a queen, they're not going to just make a new one. What will happen is if the hive gets overcrowded, there's only one queen per hive. If the hive gets overcrowded, overpopulated, this happens to our hives all the time, and it's a sign of health if they're producing like that. So if it gets overcrowded, then the hive will split. And for the hive to split, they need to create a new queen because every hive needs its queen. And so what will happen is they'll create a new queen, just random, put the larva in the queen cell. The queen cell is like larger because you need more space to accommodate the queen. She's bigger, and just feeding the royal jelly. And so there'll be another queen. Half the hive will leave with the new queen and they'll go to find a new home. But there's only ever one queen per hive. If there's two queens in a hive and they're not like looking to leave, then one queen will kill the other. There's only ever one queen, and that's kind of how it's chosen. And the queen is sort of the like heart of the hive. Like she's doing all the reproduction. Um, yeah, every hive needs a queen.
Carla, you're a wealth of information. I feel like we could keep going, but I think you've given us a lot to buzz on in terms of bees and all the different products and use cases. And thank you. Thank you for sharing. Anything you want to leave folks with? Where can people learn more about you and what you're up to and the company? And yeah, anything else you'd like to share before we sign off?
Yeah, so the company is Beekeepers Naturals. We're on all of social media. It's our Instagram is beekeepers_naturals. We're on TikTok. My Instagram is carly.kremer. My TikTok is Carly the Beekeeper. So we are all over there. Our products are available at Target, CVS, Walgreens, Whole Foods. You can buy us on Amazon. You can buy us on our website. We're also at Erewhon. And we love to hear from you. We have amazing products, but we're also a space if you want to learn more about the bees, more about the cause, more about what we're doing to have impact. We love to connect. So please reach out.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Carly. Keep up the awesome work.
Thank you.